Okay, let's just jump right into this explainer. Today, we're completely breaking down the foundational architecture of a democratic state. We're going to move all the way from the pure, abstract theory of what actually makes a country exist, straight down into the strict, microscopic mathematics of parliamentary voting. If you've ever found yourself wondering how the massive concept of a nation actually functions on a daily, mechanical level, well, you're absolutely in the right place. So, we're taking a top-down, deductive approach for this. Here's our roadmap. First, the anatomy of a state. Second, the organs of the government. Third, framing India's constitution. And finally, we'll wrap up with the math of majorities. Basically, we'll start broad, zoom into the historical framing, and finish up with the exact math needed to run the machinery. Let's get into it.
Section 1. Anatomy of a state. Building the foundation.
Right. To understand the blueprint, we really need to understand the ground we're building on, which means defining what exactly makes a state in the first place. Now, the crucial point here is that a constitution isn't just some basic rulebook. It's a document with special legal sanctity. It actively limits power, captures the ideals of the people, and maps out exactly what the government can and literally cannot do within that state.
Because a state, which, we usually just call a country, isn't just a piece of land. It requires 4 very specific, non-negotiable elements. First up, the physical basis. You gotta have a population living in a defined territory. Then you need a political basis, which is the government. And finally, the spiritual basis, which is known as sovereignty. Seriously, if you're missing even one of these 4, you just don't have a true state.
Now, the most fascinating part of that is sovereignty. It's the supreme decision-making power, and it actually has 2 faces. A true state has to have internal sovereignty, meaning its laws are absolutely binding on everyone and everything inside its borders. But it also needs external sovereignty. That means it can conduct foreign relations and have an independent foreign policy entirely without outside interference. Nobody else is pulling the strings.
Moving on to Section 2, Organs of the Government, the Machinery of the State.
So you might be wondering, if a state has this supreme, massive sovereign power, how is that power actually kept in check to protect everyday people? Well, the answer lies in the core objective of a constitution, which is providing for a limited government. We call this constitutionalism. It essentially ensures the government strictly follows the rules through a very deliberate division of labor.
Looking at the first organ, the legislature, the folks who make the laws, we see a pretty fascinating split. Some countries go with a unicameral or single-house system. China's National People's Congress is a good example of that. But others use a bicameral or 2-house system. Think of the US Congress, the UK Parliament, or India's setup with the Council of States, the Rajya Sabha, and the House of People, the Lok Sabha.
But here's the thing. Once those laws are made, they don't just enforce themselves, right? They're handed off to the executive branch to implement. And interestingly, the executive is actually split into temporary members, like your elected ministers, and permanent members, like career civil servants. Finally, the judiciary steps in to adjudicate those laws and deliver justice. Together, these 3 organs balance each other out to achieve that ultimate goal, constitutionalism, keeping power limited.
All right, Section 3, Framing India's Constitution, Meeting the Builders.
Now that we've got the theoretical blueprint down, let's look at historical reality. Let's see how the builders of the Indian state framed their constitution completely from scratch. Look at this monumental journey of the Constituent Assembly. They were elected by provincial assemblies, had their first session on December 9, 1946, and just pushed through incredible challenges, even a boycott by the Muslim League. They operated through 22 different committees, officially adopted the text on November 26, 1949, and fully commenced it on January 26, 1950.
Let's just pause and look at this staggering number. 2 years, 11 months, and 18 days. That is the exact, painstaking amount of time this took. They weren't just casually writing down rules, they were carefully crafting a consensus-based document for literally one of the most diverse populations on the planet.
And behind this massive document was immense human endeavor. This was the crucial drafting committee, led by Chairman Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. It was rigorous. Actually, scratch that. It was grueling. Members literally had to be replaced along the way because of severe sickness, like with B.L. Mitter, and even tragic deaths in the case of D.P. Khaitan. It was a deeply enduring effort.
And because they designed it as a living document, you can actually see how the Constitution has physically grown. Back at its commencement in 1950, it had 395 articles in 22 parts and 8 schedules. Cut to today, Adapting to modern realities, it stands at roughly 490 articles across 25 parts and 12 schedules. It's literally a machine that scales with its people.
Finally, Section 4, the math of majorities, operating the machinery.
Okay, we know what a state is, we have the Constitution. But how does this massive democratic machine make daily decisions? It all comes down to math. But before we crunch any numbers, you have to remember this default golden rule. Whenever the Constitution is totally silent and doesn't explicitly specify a strict voting threshold, it's just automatically assumed that a simple majority is all that's required.
Now, notice how changing the denominator here drastically changes how hard it is to actually pass something. A simple majority just means more than 50% of the members who happen to be present and voting that particular day. But an absolute majority raises the bar. It demands over 50% of the entire total membership of the House, regardless of who actually showed up. And then you have an effective majority, where you take the total strength, subtract any empty seats or vacancies, and then do the math.
Let's actually walk through a real-world example from the Rajya Sabha, which has 245 total seats. Say you've got 2 dead members, 1 who resigned and 2 who were disqualified. That's 5 vacancies, right? Subtract those from 245 and your effective strength is 240. Divide by 2, add 1, and boom, you need exactly 121 votes. And you need this specific, rigorous math for serious actions, like passing a resolution to remove the vice president.
However, for the most serious actions a democracy can possibly take, the Constitution creates a lock that requires 2 keys to turn at the exact same time. This is a special majority. To pass, a resolution needs an absolute majority, so more than 50% of the total House strength, and simultaneously, it has to be supported by not less than 2/3 of the members actually present and voting.
You definitely don't use this high mathematical bar for everyday laws. It's intentionally reserved for massive shifts in the state's blueprint. We're talking constitutional amendment bills under Article 368, or removing Supreme Court and High Court judges, the Chief Election Commissioner, or the Comptroller and Auditor General. The math literally protects the integrity of the institutions.
So, we've explored the blueprint of democracy today. We went from the abstract, spiritual theory of a sovereign state, walked through the blood, sweat, and tears of drafting a constitution, all the way down to the exact mathematical fractions needed to alter it. And I'm going to leave you with this thought to consider. Now that you know exactly how the machinery works, which majority threshold do you think protects your rights the most? Thanks for joining us on this explainer, and keep questioning the mechanics of the world around you.